So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday creativity workshop today by Craig Daalmeijer-Power, who's one of our amazing Adobe education leaders, and he's a head teacher of photography and screen and media at Nepean Arts and Design Centre in Western Sydney, Australia. So welcome, Craig. Thanks so much for joining us, and I know it's really early for you, so looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Yep. Thanks, Clara. And it's been great in the morning here. Get up and do some wonderful things in Adobe Fuse. So I understand a lot of you haven't used Fuse before, so I'm going to just do a little bit of an overview of Fuse. First up, it's a character development program that was made by a company called Mixamo in 2014. Adobe took over the program in, I think it was about November 2015. And as Steve mentioned last week, he was doing Adobe Dimension, someone asked about integrating Fuse into that part. Now that's great for static, but what we're going to look at is using Fuse with Adobe Photoshop 3D so we can actually do some animation with it and a bit of fun, as we sort of mentioned earlier. So Adobe Fuse, it's quite a interesting program in that you don't have to have experience in 3D software nor expertise in it. It's really like a builder area. So as you can see here, I'm in the assemble mode. I'm just going to maximize my screen there for you. And we can start by choosing a head here. And look, my favorite in all of them is the zombie. I don't know why, I just always go for the zombie. But yeah, you can have little toon faces because they are quite toon looking in their approach. But just simply by clicking on the actual character head, it comes into our work area. Look quite scary there at the moment. We can then give the torso, again, arrange there. With this program, it's actually ideal for all age groups because Adobe has actually put some underwear on each of the torsos. So we can actually show our K-12s without having to have them freaking out of body parts that and doing that sort of aspect. In the earlier version of Mixamo, they were actually fully naked. So one of the changes that did actually happen was that they gave them underwear. But a lot of times, we're dressing them into full clothing anyway. Just clicking on our torso. I'm going to keep with the same theme. I'm just going to keep, using the zombie parts, but you could simply build any part you want to put in here by simply clicking each one. You can see over on the left-hand side, they're actually building our character. So he's in what we call a traditional T form. So whenever you're doing character animation, we'll develop our characters up into a T form. So they've got that sort of standard one there. With this, I can go to customize, and this has got some great things here that we can work on the arms. Maybe I want to give him some bigger biceps. You can see that very slightly there, the biceps are getting larger or smaller. We can come down to modifying the face, giving some expressions there. So angry, awkward. At the moment, we've got a neutral face. But if you want an angry, sort of one, he's going to start frowning. Goofy or happy. So we actually have a happy zombie for some reason. He's decided that he's had enough brains for this time of the day. Going down to, I'm going to go down to the torso. You can see that we can start working on things like the stomach area. So this one has had a lot of sort of food area. So we can actually go up and down. So you can actually lower that stomach down, and if I wanted to see, I can turn him around and start developing up that. So is it putting on a few 10 kilos or more or less? It's a great weight loss sort of one there. It's utilizing that sort of aspect. You can also click on each area and then highlight those ones as well. So we're not going to have our naked zombie running around. We're actually going to dress him. Right, so from here, again, we can go in and choose different tops. right? And if I scroll through, you can see there's quite a number of different choices for us to choose from. You know, trench coats and tactical gear, through to, you know, being a relaxed tees. You know, in this one, you know, we got in the bottoms, so in there in the different pants, I can, you know, put him on with a flared mini, so you can actually get, you know, different sort of dress ones. You know, they don't discriminate on any sort of, you know, style they want to dress in. So I'm going to give this one a Sangu armor, give him a bit of a warrior sort of look to him. Right, now with these, as we can see with the clothing, I can go to texture, and clicking on the texture area, I can see that there's all these different choices here. So I can say, well, with the pants are actually canvas and they're this color. I didn't want that color. I can actually simply go and change the color as well. I can also age, so by you know, aging them and, you know, giving them so they actually do change in the area here, and also it's been a little bit darker for us. So just inside of Fuse, you can bring in your own objects. So if you are, you know, doing some more advanced 3D with your students or yourself, if you're doing some experimentation, you can import OBJs in as characters. So you know, Chana, I know that you love your duckies. You could actually have a ducky character that you could bring in if you've actually generated as an OBJ and bring that across and fine tune it. But with this, you can see up in the top corner up here, we have the capability of having send to Mixamo. So Mixamo is still owned by Adobe now, has an online animation area that we can go to. So it can generate that, but what I want to do today is actually send it to the CC library. So by sending it to the library is a good way of bringing it into Photoshop. Okay, so difference in the workflows, if I bring it to Mixamo, I can actually make it into what they call a read animation. So it actually puts in a whole skeleton into the actual body, and then I can export it back into another 3D program. So that's if you're going to go to a traditional 3D workflow. Today, I want to show you how to do that inside of Photoshop. So we're going to save it to our library. And here I can go to my character name, Zombie Warrior. You know, choose a library where you'd actually like to have your libraries. I do have quite a number of libraries there. So if you did you know, have a library set up previous, a folder that you want to work to, you can go to that. So today I'm just going to drop this into Capture and Animate and then hit Save. So now that exports that model for us up into the cloud. You can see down the bottom it's exporting it as an OBJ. It's grabbing all the textures as well for us. So it's combining not just but also all the textures. Now, depending on you know, how much clothing you put on, how much alteration. I didn't actually alter height. You can actually change the height of your character. Look, when students do this, end up finding they can choose the same character, but when you customize it, they have a range of different, you know, versions. I've had everything from little piggies through to giants, and different, you know, sort of things from fully, you know, sort of policemen through to, you know, a whole range of different cross-dressing, you name it, we've had it. Okay, so just as this going into the rigging. All right, so that's the simple part that we've done inside of Fuse. And I'm now going to cut over to Adobe Photoshop simply by doing done. I'm just going to close off out of Fuse. Now, before I close out of Fuse, if I wanted to be able to use this character at any given time, I can actually just save this character as a Fuse character available for us to, so if I go Zombie Warrior, right, this will save it as a .fuse file. I'm just going to pop to the desktop. And so I might want to come back later on and modify this character for another version and then upload it again to the cloud for use of the libraries. All right, so I've just closed out a Fuse. I'm just closing out, it's good. Now I'm just going to go to Photoshop. All right, in Photoshop, by going to File, New, I've just made a new canvas. It matters on which size you want to run with. If you go and say, this is an animation, so I need to work with screen res. So the one that I've chosen here is just 1024 by 768 pixels at 72 dpi. That way then, this is going to be good for web-based work. If I was going to go to put it into a movie file or something like that, I might choose high definition. So I'll then look at 1920 by 1080 pixels. Right, so they're really important ones there. You're doing animation. If you choose to do it as print, the problem with the print one would be that the file would be quite large and be a lot slower for rendering for us as well. It's not saying you can't do it, it's just saying that you've got to allow a lot more time for your working. So to actually get my character, I'm going to get into my library. So you could go to Window Libraries if you haven't got your library up there. I've got it sitting up here. And I can now go to, got a list of things that are in my library here beforehand. And I've got my zombie warrior here. So I'm going to just now click and drag that into my artboard. And what Photoshop will do is we're now in the 3D format of Adobe Photoshop CC 2019. Since version 2017, we've actually been able to have this sort of swapping over. What will happen is I click on my move tool, you can see we're now in this 3D environment. Our toolbar has actually changed up the top. We've still got our zombie warrior sitting in his T zone. He's still working there. But what I'm going to be able to do here is if I click on him and go to properties, I now have these different choices. So by clicking on the character, you can have different choices on different parts of the character itself. So clicking in the torso, we end up with 3 different options here. One that has a little icon with, it looks like just sort of the distorted T happening. We have one for the face. So even if I've chosen my character to have a happy face, I can actually include some extra animations here. These animations on this side are actually the same ones that are on the Mixamo website, so that we can actually have a choice of both there. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go into our animation choices for the body. And by simply clicking on one, I can go, here's an old man standing idle. What it's done, you can see that there's a very thin key line in there, and straight away we've got our character doing a bit of a hunch over as though like he's an old man and he's standing idle. If I want some animation here, I could go idle, standing, looking around. Just standing there, and he's able to be. So if I then hit the play button, our character is now just standing there and just randomly looking around. You can see within a few minutes, we can go from developing a character, bringing it into Photoshop, and already starting to animate. Right? Although he's in what we call a white room at the moment with nothing else around him, we can develop that further. So my favorite one in the list of options that they've got for the animations is the sunbar. And with this, you can see that obviously the developers of Fuse do have that same thing. I can imagine them all in their developing pod working there, playing the sunbar and saying, how does these characters do this sort of aspect? Because there's not just one, there's actually quite a few different versions of the sunbar. So today, we're we've got our little character here. I did choose in the one that I uploaded to give him some dreadlocks as well. You could have different hairstyles. So in that vein, I'm going to give him the Foxy Samba Reggae Dance. All right, so with this one here, we've got our samba there. What I'm going to do in our timeline down the bottom, expand this out for about 30 seconds.
And we have a quick question, Craig, from
Yeah.
Suzanne, can you use the same way in Photoshop when you import from Adobe Dimensions?
So what we're talking about, so we can use the same, what was that, sorry, the question again?
So when you import from Adobe Dimensions, is it similar process? I think that is what
Yes,
Suzanne
but
was asking.
yes, what will happen is, yeah, you have to export out the character as an OBJ, so an object file. So if you were to bring it into the library, it's actually the OBJ file, and then you can bring that into Dimension. So yes, that's correct. That's that approach. Um, the OBJ file, the object file, is actually almost like I call it the proxy international standard to be able to go from one program to another program. There are a couple of other options for there, but there'll be in other sessions as well that we can talk about there. So with our Samba dude, if I went now and played, you can see that in slow-mo we've got happening the Samba, and he's doing it quite well. All right, so what I want to be able to do here in our timeline now is actually to pop him into an environment. So if I come back to my layers, you can see in our layers at the moment, we've got just our zombie warrior sitting on one layer on this artboard. So what I want to do is bring in a background. So in this case, I'm just going to bring in a background from Adobe Stock for today. Just a 2D background. Now I could have, and this would be developed in Illustrator, so you could have done that as well. At the moment, when I'm looking in Photoshop, just like we are in Photoshop with normal layers, it's about making sure the layers are in the right location. If I wanted to move my character around, I could come over to the side here, and you can see that you can pan your camera to where you'd like to actually have the camera position. You can also dolly the camera, so having that scaling backwards or forwards. And now I've got my zombie warrior standing in a nice meadow field and being able to, again, dance around in that location. But what we're missing is the samba itself. So we're going to add that in, and you can see here we've got an audio track with nothing in it at the moment. So going down and clicking on the little note there, you can go to add audio. And in my folders, I've got my little Photoshop demo here folder. I've got a music folder, and I've got the Brazilian samba. So opening that there, and it's going way too long for the bit that I've got animated. So we can actually move our head area here, having that one there, going to the pull down list, and I can split at the playhead. Right, so that way then I can click on that extra area and I can delete that away. Right, so that way then I've now got my samba dance happening at the same time as my character who's up there. It's not going to go for 4 or 5 minutes long. Just made a really short clip for demonstration purposes today. And when I play that, we've got our little samba happening. All right, so that's a really cool way of bringing in a background that's still like you could bring in any environment there that related to the character. as a example, I'll just download one that I previously made, and I presented this last year, and we actually had a zombie cop doing much the same thing, and so what I wanted to be able to show you, he could have been in the middle of the street, middle of New York. He could have been a traffic policeman, doing that sort of really cool sort of dance aspect. So where we want to go from this is the background. We might not have wanted a still photo or an Illustrator file there. Instead, we might want to have a 3D environment. So stepping it up, 3D character with a 3D environment. And I'm going to show you how we can use a thing called a digital elevation map. Now, just flicking back here, has anyone ever used a digital elevation map or heard of that?
Yeah, so we have a couple more questions too,
Yeah.
Craig, as well, that I was just holding on to for a moment. But the first question from Andrea is, are there more animation sets that are available for download or library access?
Okay, so with the animation sets that are there, I'm on that layer. Always remember, be on the right layer. So these animation sets are actually only loaded in from the Mixamo one. So at the moment, you can't actually make your own, but there is something like, if I get rid of Slumber, just do a search. There's 123 pages of animation sets. So, and each page I think has about 40. So there's approximately 500 or so animation sets that you can do there. And look, I use this in my animation class to introduce the students to 3D before we go and do some heavier ones where they do their own in the 3D programs. And sometimes some of them, by making different sets of animations and then bringing in another character onto the timeline, they can actually have a whole story being told. All of a sudden you can have someone standing in a sad disposition. You can have them playing air guitar or an MC rapping on a mic. So you can see that that whole storyline can be played out. The playing a guitar one, I've had students have actually then gone and made a guitar in their 3D program, made it as an OBJ and imported it in. So then we've got the character holding a guitar. So lots and lots of capability here to really push the boundaries and explore the program itself in a number of different ways that I don't think Mixamo nor Adobe have ever thought that they could be used. Right?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people use these as little memes to use as well. Like some of the younger generation go, "Oh, I can make a meme for this," and they've made their own little versions and having little short animations happening. But I've also seen lots of longer stories happening out of that. With the background, I was just saying, you can use, as we said, we're in Photoshop, so you can bring in, smart objects. You can bring in, something from Illustrator. You can bring in something from Photoshop, from another, still image that you've produced. I've been, got a whole lot of backgrounds in the library that I've just used. So again, using some of the Adobe stock area. But the one I want to go to, and
Oh, we just had one more question about just the animation itself. So the other question is around from Claudia, kind of twofold. First, how do you can you change the position of one arm or one leg in the animation? And then Andrea, kind of along the same lines, can you speed up the animation for a faster or slower dance?
Yeah. So with the two questions there. One with the animation of the character, the rigging. At the moment, you can't change the rigging itself, which is the arms or legs, other than choosing proportional sort of ways. I know that at the moment the Fuse team are actually the Dimension team, right? So so they've actually stopped any further development of Fuse. It's not that idea. I keep on asking the question. So is it going to be closed off? Is it going to be shelved? And they said no. At the moment, the team's working on Dimension, and then they'll come back to Fuse. So I'm hoping that's going to be the future sort of one there. And so lots of input into there saying, well, we would actually like to do things like rigging, like those sort of changing as well. But I'm sure that'll be added in the future. The other one with the timing, so you can change the character's speed by putting it over a longer timeline, but also choosing different types of pre-selection. So a lot of what I would do would be jumping out of here if I wasn't happy with the speed of the actual dance. I would not put the audio file to it, and I would have exported it out as a video file, jumped into Premiere, and then I'd change my speed there. Right, so it is actually integration of not just using Photoshop or Fuse, but also using other programs within the Adobe suite. Okay. All right, so just moving on with the DEM, right? So digital elevation map, right? So satellites that go around the world, taking photos of the world itself. They have different types of imagery that they produce. And if you look for a digital elevation map, it will have a scale of grayscale that goes from black being the most bottom part and white being the highest point. So with a digital elevation map, I always get my tongue tied around that one. That's why most of the time you hear it called a DEM. A DEM, in this case, all I did was I just opened up Photoshop, opened up a canvas, and just got my paintbrush, having it on black, and then just simply did a little squiggle. And having soft edges of the brush means that I'm going to have a high point with a gradation going down into a valley space. So you could go and get a satellite image that is a DEM, that is from a real location. I've done that a number of times. You can get, I think it's Mount St. Helens before it exploded with the volcano. There are some really cool DEMs there of that, before and after. You can get some of the American deserts are available as well. And they are available at a place called the USGS, so the United States Geospatial location, and that's usgs.gov. They're a website that you can go there and download some low-res DEMs. They do have high-res ones, but they do charge quite a lot of money because they're used by geospatial scientists and that sort of aspect. But if you're looking for a really cool environment, you could do that. In this case, I just want to show you how you can make your own, explore your own environment. So what's this little squiggle going to happen and turn into? And what I will do, because I can just see there's a little bit here, but I'm just going to make a really deep sort of location. Right, so that one's there. If I wanted to soften my brush, I'm just going to soften those edges. So now you can see that this will be a lot deeper, then it'll go up into a larger area, wiggle through like a valley, and this is the higher area. And everyone's going, I can't see that. Craig's looking there going, there's this there. Well, let's make it in there. So we go to 3D, up in our menu bar for Photoshop CC. Right? We go to New Mesh from Layer. And from there, we're going to use a thing called Depth Map to the plane. Right, so going up to 3D, new mesh layer, depth map to the plane. The plane is because it's a flat plane, and it's now going to look there for the black points and the white points and the greys in between and produce a 3D environment for us. And there we have it. Check that out. We've got our own 3D environment location. And now if I dolly the camera, I can then fill that space up. So there in my picture, I could now have my zombie character dancing in the front area by just bringing him into this layer, or vice versa, bringing this layer into the other location. But at the moment, it looks a bit polarish, or it's very much greys and blacks and whites. I can now come back to my brush and choose an appropriate color for what I'd like to have. And now come back and start just painting in my environment. Now, because we are in a 3D environment, you can see that you need to move around in that environment to paint all the faces of the different parts of the valley in that sort of aspect. And we can go and use overlays in this, but again, I'm looking at the level to being able to introduce this to any student to actually be able to play in a 3D environment and get something that they can work with. I'm just going to give a bit of a water scene through this. Just simply by painting in the scene, we've gone from a grey drab sort of environment to now having an environment that I then come up, you can start seeing the mountains with the valley with the stream coming through there. Being able to work with that, and with this background layer, I can come now. My scene. Okay, sorry, I let go too early. And in this one, we need to look at dollying and maybe scaling as well. So what I'm going to do, because I need to move around in this one, I might do it the other way around and bring the character across. Just to say I'm just looking at time because I do want to do a few more things. There we are, excellent. That's more what I wanted. Okay. I want to bring him in the foreground there, just so he's got this background there. So we're now bringing him into that environment itself. But as you can see, the sky up the back, doesn't have anything there. At the moment, I haven't got a timeline. I could create a video timeline, and we can then use some animation for that background. So we could put in clouds moving across while we're actually doing the slumber. And what I'm going to do, I've just got one I prepared earlier. So there's our dancing one there. And now if I go to my Dem Dance, you can see there we've got our multiple layers. So I've got 3 layers, my zombie warrior dance, my background, and my atmosphere background. Now that background, there is just a picture of a sky, static, but again, coming down to our timeline, I can actually put some key points in there for allowing it to move across as well. And so if I'll just move this up so we can actually see that. So you can see that I've got the Zumba one in there, and if we hit the play, sorry, it's just a bit slow at the moment, probably because I've got multiple 3D that's open at the moment on my poor Mac at the moment. Okay, so as you can see there, the rendering is out of sync with the music itself because I've got multiple ones open. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I'm just going to close a couple of those things off. Okay. And let me see if I can get that one to play. So with that there, multiple layers, everyone is comfortable with obviously using Photoshop with the layers, but this is about using layers and animation and 3D objects. You will find that it is very RAM intensive. If you do find that your computer slows down a lot, you need to go into preferences and look at your performance and increase that performance up around about the 95, even to 100% if you don't have any other programs running. And I'm a big one for having least amount of history states. I know that the standard is 50 history states, but when you start putting in a lot of 3D, it takes up a lot more resources. So decreasing your history states lets it work a lot better. All right, so having the Zumba being able to play, I'm happy with that. So what am I going to do now is export it. Now, what we're going to do here is if you render video, in this case here, I'm using Adobe Media Encoder, H.264. You can choose what preset you want and sort of what export out. So remember when I was saying before, if I'm doing something that's going to go to HD, I would actually make my canvas the right size of 1920 by 1080. But on this one here, it could be we're finding a lot more vertical vision being shown now, and so it could be one other choices as well. But for this one, I've just chosen low quality, taking it from the frame rate. So again, it's 30 frames per second, and the hit render. Now with the render, I'm just mindful of being able some time for Q&A. Once I hit render, it then just goes and opens up and takes its time to actually render out, and it starts exporting. You will find that exporting out of Photoshop with 3D does take a bit of time. So it is one of those ones where you need to go have coffee, or in my case, have breakfast after this, come back, and you'll actually have your video exported. What I'm going to do for today is minimize this down and show you the actual output there. So what we're watching here, obviously we can see our zombie dancing to the Zumba, but also have a look at the clouds itself moving through that. Just very slowly. Right, so having that sort of dance movements going through there. So hopefully that's given you an insight into Fuse, how you can actually bring Fuse into Photoshop, and also do a bit of animation in there in a 3D environment. So I'm just going to jump back and see if we've got any questions or anything.
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much. And I love seeing the final product too. It's so fun to see all of these elements come together. And so we had two questions that I saw in here. So first, Andrea asked, could we save a self-created animation like an action set?
So an animation self,
A
I'm not too
self-created,
sure about that.
yeah, like an action set. Um, well, we can probably unmute everyone
Well,
after that and talk about more.
what, yeah, what that could be, because actions are just a macro recording every step.
Mhm.
So yeah, all those steps I was taking there, you could actually make an action as part of your pipeline or your workflow. That's yeah. So hopefully that's answered that question. But that's thinking outside the box. That would be a way of you adding another one that you could do it once, record through the whole process, making it an action, and then being able to give that to others that are working that workflow as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Craig, so much. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. But thank you again for taking the time, especially early in the morning, joining us.
Not a
And
problem.
and for those who are tuning in, what would be the best way to reach out to you if
Yeah.
educators have further questions?
If you've got any further questions, I'm on Adobe Education Exchange. So there's my profile. Available, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm not as much, but I have had a makeover, but I'm still getting in there with that. So yeah, definitely Facebook and LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to share with the community. Take any questions. Yeah, awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Craig, so much. And be sure to join us next week. We'll actually have another Australian Adobe Education leader on, Chris Betcher, who will be talking about nice, clean 360 photos. Make your 3D60 photos look awesome with new spherical 3D mode in Photoshop 2018. So we're looking forward to that too. And we'll see you next week back at our
That'll be
regular time at 12 o'clock noon Pacific time. All right. Thanks for tuning in.